Liara floated above the city of Aldor, her long silver robes brushing lightly against the wind as she looked down at the sprawling towers. The city gleamed under the twin suns, its walls made of crystal-like material that reflected the light and colors that shifted with every step. She had lived here all her life, trained to serve as a diplomat for her people, skilled in negotiation and etiquette. Everything in Althera was precise, organized, and orderly. Everything, except perhaps the humans who sometimes arrived from far-off stars. Humans were rare on Althera. They were known to the aliens as peaceful but unpredictable. Some elders scoffed at them, calling them primitive. Others were curious, intrigued by their strange ideas of kindness and fairness. Liara had always been curious too, but she had never met one until today. The trading hall was enormous. Hundreds of species moved through it, each carrying goods and speaking in languages Liara did not understand. Stalls lined every corner, stacked with bright fruits from distant planets. Machines that hummed with energy, and fabrics that changed color when touched. Liara walked carefully, gliding above the floor, her eyes scanning for the human trader she had come to meet. Over here, a voice called, soft and melodic. Yet carrying a calm strength, Liara turned and saw him. He was not tall by Altheron standards, but his posture was confident. His clothes were simple, made of soft fabrics that seemed almost plain compared to the vibrant outfits of the aliens around him. His brown hair fell lightly over his forehead, and his eyes bright deep. Instead, he looked at her as if he could see right through the walls she had built around herself. "Greetings, Liara," he said with a warm smile. "I hope your journey was comfortable." It was Liara replied, surprised by how easy it was to speak to him. "And yours?" "Always comfortable," he said. "I like to make my own luck, rather than depend on machines or spells." Liara tilted her head, intrigued. Humans spoke differently, but there was a clarity in their words that made her listen carefully. Unlike the Altherans, who often hid meaning behind layers of etiquette, humans were direct but not rude. Polite, yet honest. They walked together through the hall, talking about the trade routes, the supplies, and the people. Liara noticed how Aaron's eyes kept moving, observing everything: the cracks in the walls, the way the light bounced off the crystal towers. It's even the small children running between the stalls. He seemed aware of everything, yet calm, unhurried, and gentle. "Why do you look at the children?" she asked, curious. "They are learning," he said simply. "Watching them is easier than watching the traders. Children show what is possible without rules yet." Liara laughed softly. "You are a curious human," he smiled. "And you are a careful alien. Perhaps we balance each other." As the days passed, Liara and Yuen met often. At first it was about trade, learning customs and sharing ideas. But slowly, something deeper grew. Liara found herself thinking about him when she was alone, imagining his calm smile even in the midst of her busiest days. She admired how he helped others gently, guiding a lost child back to her parents, offering assistance to an alien struggling with a new machine, or politely correcting misinformation without embarrassing anyone. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Liara found herself walking with Une along the city's highest tower. The wind was cool, brushing their faces, and the view below was breathtaking. "You seem different from other humans I have read about," she said, her voice almost hesitant. En looked at her, calm and thoughtful. "Different how?" "You are peaceful, yes, but there is something more. You think clearly. You act kindly, you inspire trust. I do not know why, but I feel safe with you." Yuen smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "That is what humans can be. We are peaceful, yes, but we are also capable of courage. Sometimes we act not out of fear, but out of love or principle. That is when we are strongest." Liara looked at him, surprised by the quiet strength in his words. She had spent her life studying diplomacy, negotiation, and strategy. She had met warriors, leaders, and scholars. But she had never met someone who combined such gentleness with an invisible strength. Over the next few weeks, their friendship deepened, and shared stories of Earth, of quiet forests, of seas that stretched farther than any alien could imagine, of humans who built machines, wrote poems, and fought for justice not because they wanted power, but because they believed it was the right thing to do. Liara listened, fascinated. Then one day, during a feast held in his honor, Un did something unexpected. He did not boast about his deeds or impress anyone with strange technologies. Instead, he noticed an elderly alien struggling to reach a drink and simply offered his hand. He helped without hesitation, without show, without expecting anything in return. Lyra's heart swelled. It was this combination: gentle kindness, calm intelligence, and quiet strength that made him remarkable. Not flashy like the Altherans, not aggressive like some traders from other worlds. Just human. Weeks turned into months. Liara realized she had come to love him not for his skill in trade, not for his calm demeanor alone, but for the essence of who he was. A human could be peaceful, yes, but he could also inspire courage and hope just by being himself. It was during a quiet evening, as the twin moons of Aldera rose, casting silver light across the city, that Un spoke. Liara, he said, taking her hand gently, I have traveled across stars, met many civilizations, but none have felt like home. You are my home. Liora's breath caught. I do not have many words, but I have intentions. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Liara looked into his eyes, and she saw at their peace, honesty, and a strength she had never seen before. She thought of all the quiet acts, all the small moments where he had shown brilliance without striving for recognition. She realized that the human she had met was far more than peaceful. He was capable of greatness. Yes, she whispered, I will marry you. The city of Althera continued its life around them. Unaware of the small human who had already begun to change one alien's heart, UN smiled, gently holding her hand, and together they watched the twin moons rise, marking the beginning of a life built not on power, but on trust, kindness, and the quiet strength of a peaceful human. Little did Liara know that the man she had married, calm and gentle though he seemed, carried within him the courage and resolve that could one day change the fate of an entire city, and perhaps more. For now, though there was only peace, laughter, and the simple joy of being together, the city of Althera shimmered under the twin suns as life carried on in its usual rhythm. Markets bustled, crystal towers reflected the sunlight in dazzling colors, and the air hummed with the energy of countless technologies. Yet beneath this beauty, a tension began to grow subtle. Like a shadow moving across a brightly lit floor, Liara had felt it first in the council chambers. Rumors had reached her ears, whispers of a rogue faction, a group of aliens dissatisfied with the city's leadership. They were planning something dangerous. But the elders, cautious and slow to act, dismissed these concerns as paranoia. Liara worried. She knew Un would notice the change in the city, just as she did. Humans, she had learned, could sense shifts in the energy of a place on instinct born from survival and attention to detail. UN, she said one evening. As they walked along the quiet streets after a long day of council meetings, there are rumors. A faction that may be planning an attack. I do not know how serious it is. UN looked up at the twin moons rising above the towers, his calm eyes reflecting their soft glow. Rumors do not always mean danger, he said softly, but it is wise to watch. Gather information quietly and observe. Panic never helps, Liara nodded, grateful for his calm presence. He always had a way of making her heart steady. Even when shadows grew around her, the next morning, Un set out to understand more. Unlike the aliens, who often relied on security drones and formal reports, he moved among the city's people, quietly asking questions, observing patterns, and noting behaviors. Children told him more than adults did. Merchants revealed small details without realizing it. By the end of the day, Yuan had a map in his mind, a web of connections, routes, and weak points. Liara watched in silent admiration. You do not rely on reports or machines, she said. You see everything yourself. That is how humans survive, he replied simply. We notice what others miss. We adapt. We watch. And when the time comes, we act. That evening, a minor incident confirmed Aaron's suspicions. A shipment meant for the city's central energy hub went missing. Aliens blamed each other, arguing endlessly over who was responsible. But Ewan quietly traced the path of the shipment, noticing subtle signs, a broken lock here, a footprint there. Within hours, he had identified the likely culprits, members of the rogue faction hiding in plain sight. Liara was amazed. You solved this in hours, while our entire council could not even decide on who to investigate first? Unshrugged, his calm smile never leaving his face. Sometimes the simplest approach works best. Observe, analyze, act. Panic in politics only slow the solution. But the rogue faction was not finished. That night, alarms echoed across the city. Small explosions rocked the outer walls, sending frightened citizens into the streets. The council scrambled, trying to respond with slow, cautious strategies. Liara felt her heart pound as she watched chaos erupt around her. Ian remained calm. He guided frightened citizens to safety, calmly directing them through side streets and into secure buildings. Children clung to him without fear, sensing the trustworthiness of his presence. Liara could not help but follow him, relying on his steadiness like a lifeline. At the city gates, Yuan observed the attackers. They were alien mercenaries, lightly armed but highly skilled, striking fast and retreating before reinforcements could respond. The council's soldiers were competent but disorganized, unprepared for such tactics. Yuan noticed patterns. The mercenaries moved in predictable ways, leaving trails of energy residue in the air that a human eye trained for observation could see. Liara, trained in diplomacy and etiquette, could not see these details. But she trusted completely. Follow my instructions, he said to the guards, his voice calm but firm. Do not attack immediately. Lead them into channels where they are exposed. Watch their movements. Then we will act. The aliens exchanged confused glances. They had never taken orders from a human, and certainly not one so calm in the face of danger. But there was authority in Aaron's quiet demeanor, a strange confidence that made them obey. Within hours, the attackers had been trapped in narrow passages of the city's outer walls. An had anticipated their movements, using their own speed and overconfidence against them. The rogue faction could not escape, and most were captured without a single casualty among the citizens. Lyra's eyes were wide with awe. You did this without drawing your sword, she whispered. Yuan smiled faintly. Sometimes, strength is in thought, not violence. Humans can win battles in many ways, and we prefer the ways that protect the innocent. That night, as the city quieted, Liara and Une walked along the same tower where he had proposed. The twin moons cast silver light across the streets below, now peaceful once more. You are remarkable, Liara said softly. You did all this? And yet you never fought. You never harmed anyone. That is the way we are, Un replied. We are peaceful. But peace is not weakness. We watch, we understand, and when the moment comes, we act not out of anger, but out of duty. Humans have courage, even when it is quiet. Liara felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that what she had loved about Una gentleness, the calm, the kindness, was only part of the truth. Hidden beneath it was a strength that no one could ignore, a brilliance that could outthink any threat, and a courage that could stand against any danger. Days passed and life in Althera returned to its rhythm. The citizens celebrated their narrow escape, and the rogue faction was quietly dealt with by the council. Yet Liara knew that the peace was fragile. Shadows would always linger, waiting for opportunities. And she also knew that the human she had married would be ready to face danger, ready to protect, ready to act when the city needed him most. Yuan spent the following weeks quietly teaching Liara some of his ways. Not weapons or combat, but observation, strategy, and patience. They would walk through crowded markets, He would point out subtle details she had never noticed, the way a merchant shifted his weight when lying, the pattern in which a delivery drone moved, the subtle signals humans and aliens alike gave without realizing it. "It is not magic," he said once. "It is noticing what others do not. It is preparation. Humans have survived for thousands of years because we pay attention, and we act wisely when needed." Liara absorbed every lesson eagerly. She realized that Aaron's strength was not just in his ability to act decisively, but in the way he prepared, observed, and understood. She had married a peaceful man, yes, but one whose mind was sharp, whose courage was quiet, whose heart was strong. One evening, as the twin moons rose again, Liara turned to him. "In one day, will you need to fight? Will your sword ever leave its sheath?" Aaron's expression was thoughtful. "Perhaps, but only if there is no other choice. Humans do not fight for glory. We fight for duty, for love, for the innocent. And when we do, we give everything not recklessly, but with wisdom and care." Liara nodded, understanding more than she had ever understood before. The man she had married was peaceful, yes, but he carried within him the potential for greatness, a strength that no danger could diminish. She felt both awe and comfort, knowing that, with him by her side, Althora her city, her home was safer than she had ever imagined. The days following the capture of the rogue faction were quieter than the chaos of the previous attack, but Liara could feel tension lingering in the air. The city of Althora had returned to its normal rhythm on the surface, but beneath the crystal towers and bustling markets, whispers of discontent continued to grow. Some aliens had begun questioning the Council's ability to protect the city. Others doubted that peace alone could prevent future attacks. Liara noticed it in the faces of the citizens. Parents held their children a little tighter. Merchants looked over their shoulders more often. Even the council members walked with a careful vigilance that did not belong to them before. Yuen, however, remained his calm, observing self. He would walk through the streets with Liara, speaking quietly to her about patterns he noticed, behaviors of people that could be clues to further unrest. His observations were meticulous, often pointing out things Liara would never have noticed. "You see the way the guards patrol the perimeter?" N asked one afternoon, crouching slightly to watch a group moving near a crystal wall. "They always move in predictable patterns. Anyone watching carefully could exploit that," Liara frowned. "But they are trained to protect the city. Surely they would notice any weakness." Perhaps Yuen said, shrugging. "But trained guards are still predictable. Human armies learn from patterns and mistakes. Sometimes cleverness is more powerful than numbers." She admired his ability to think ahead. Humans, she had begun to realize, were not just peaceful, they were adaptable. They observed, learned, and acted in ways the aliens often overlooked. She had married a man who could see the city not just as it was, but as it could be. That evening, a commotion erupted near the city gates. A small group of rogue aliens had managed to sneak past the outer patrols. They were lightly armed, but swift, aiming to cause disruption and fear rather than outright destruction. The Council's soldiers rushed to intercept them, but the attackers were clever. Moving unpredictably, exploiting the gaps in the city's defenses, Lyra's heart raced. The calm she had come to cherish in her life with Yuen felt fragile in this moment. She instinctively reached for his hand, and he squeezed it gently, silently reassuring her that he had noticed everything. "Liara, stay close to me," he said quietly. "Observe, but do not panic. There is always a solution." He moved forward, not with a weapon in hand, but with calm precision. His mind worked quickly, analyzing the attackers' movements, predicting their next steps, and identifying weak points. Unlike the Althorans, who relied heavily on brute force and technology, In relied on reasoning, pattern recognition, and human intuition honed by centuries of survival. The attackers tried to breach the central market, hoping to incite panic. Citizens began to scatter, and some of the guards hesitated, unsure of the correct strategy. Ian stepped forward, quietly instructing small groups of defenders to take positions that would block the attackers' path. He coordinated without authority, relying only on the trust he inspired by his calm and steady demeanor. Liara watched in amazement. "And they listen to you, even though you are just a human," she whispered. "They listen because they know I have seen the pattern," he said. "Humans do not need to demand obedience. We earn it by acting wisely and protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The rogue aliens moved closer to the city's central square, hoping to draw the defenders into a trap. Ian anticipated their route and quietly led small groups of guards to intercept at key points. Using knowledge of the city's layout, he created choke points where the attackers' numbers would be less effective. Liara followed him, her heart pounding with both fear and admiration. She realized that Aaron's calmness was not just a personality trait. It was a shield, a strategy, and a weapon all in one. He did not fight with anger or force, but with thought, precision, and courage. As the attackers reached the first choke point, Yuen gave a quiet signal. The guards, following his subtle gestures, moved in perfect coordination. The attackers found themselves trapped, unable to move forward without confrontation. Panic flashed across their faces as they realized their advantage had been neutralized. Lyra's eyes widened as she saw how Un had orchestrated everything. No one had been hurt yet the attackers were now at a disadvantage. Aaron's mind was moving faster than anyone else's, and his calm, his decisive instructions were turning the tide without the need for violence, but the situation was still dangerous. One of the attackers, realizing the trap, pulled a small energy blade and charged toward a group of fleeing citizens. Liara gasped, fear gripping her heart. She had never seen Yuen fight, and she hoped she would never have to. Aaron's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with resolve. He stepped forward, drawing his sword for the first time. It was a human sword, elegant, simple, and deadly in skilled hands. Unlike the flashy weapons of Eltheron warriors, it seemed almost humble, yet it radiated strength. He moved with precision, intercepting the attacker before he could harm anyone. The clash was swift, controlled, and final. The attacker fell, disarmed and incapacitated, and the remaining rogues froze at the sight of the human standing calmly in the center of the square. Liora's breath caught in her throat. She had always known humans were strong, but to see Yuen act so decisively, protecting the innocent, without a hint of hesitation, was awe-inspiring. "Step back, Liara," Yuen said softly. "I have this under control." The rogue aliens, seeing their advantage gone and facing the calm, skilled human, began to retreat, and anticipated their moves, blocking escape routes and guiding the city guards to capture them without unnecessary violence. When the square finally fell silent, Liara rushed to his side. You drew your sword. You fought," she said, her voice a mix of fear and wonder. "I did what was necessary," he replied, sheathing the blade. "Humans fight not for glory, but for protection. Peace is always preferred, but courage is needed when peace is threatened." Liara's heart swelled with admiration. The man she had married was peaceful, gentle, and kind, but when the moment demanded it, he became a force to be reckoned with. He had protected the city without panic, without recklessness, without unnecessary harm. That night, as they walked back to their home, Liara could not stop thinking about the events of the day. The city had survived because of his courage and intelligence. His ability to act decisively, calmly, morally, was something no Althoran warrior or council member had shown. She said finally, breaking the silence. "I always knew you were remarkable. But today, I saw the truth. You are extraordinary." He looked at her, his calm smile soft but full of meaning. "Extraordinary? Perhaps, but humans are like this. Peaceful, yet capable of courage when it is needed. Kind, yet capable of strength. That is our nature," Liara nodded, understanding more than she ever had. She had married a human, thinking he was only peaceful. She had loved his gentleness and wisdom. But she had discovered a hidden depth, a quiet power that could protect, inspire, and change the course of events. Over the following days, the city slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The captured rogues were dealt with, and citizens resumed their routines. Yet Liara noticed a change in the way people looked at Un. Aliens who had once doubted humans now regarded him with respect. Guards who had once ignored him now followed his subtle instructions. Even the council, still cautious, had begun to see the wisdom in human thought. Liara, walking beside Un, as they observed the city from their tower, felt a mix of pride and awe. She had married a peaceful human, but she had found a man whose intelligence, courage, and moral strength were unmatched. He had faced danger calmly, protected the innocent, and turned a moment of fear into a display of brilliance. And Liara knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. The shadows on Althora might grow stronger, threats might rise again, but the man she had married would be ready. Not because he desired war or conflict, but because he was human, peaceful, courageous, and capable of greatness. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his touch. "Whatever comes next," she whispered, "I know we will face it together." An smiled, his eyes reflecting the twin moons once more. "Together," he said, "and remember, peace is not weakness. It is preparation, wisdom, and the courage to act when it is needed." Liara realized she had married a man who was more than peaceful. He was a human who carried the essence of greatness within him, a quiet strength, calm courage, and a brilliance that no shadow could overcome. And Althora, for all its beauty and order, was safer because of him. The morning sun spilled golden light across the crystal towers of Althora, but the city's usual calm was gone. Alarms rang through the streets, echoing across every district. Citizens rushed from their homes, merchants abandoned stalls, and guards scrambled to their posts. The rogue faction, previously cautious and fragmented, had now returned in full force. Launching a coordinated assault on the city, Liara gripped Aaron's hand tightly as they moved through the crowded streets. Her heart pounded with fear, but his calm presence steadied her. It's worse than before," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes scanning the cityscape. "Yes, but panic will not save anyone. Follow me and stay close. Observe, but do not act unless necessary." The first wave of attackers struck near the city's central square. They were heavily armed, moving in coordinated groups that bypassed outer patrols. Energy blasts struck walls, shattering crystal structures, and sending shards scattering through the air. Civilians screamed and ducked for cover. Liora's breath caught as she saw a young alien child stumble into the open. Without thinking, she reached to pull the child to safety, but Un was already moving. With a swift motion, he scooped the child into his arms, his calmness a shield against the chaos around them. "Stay behind me," he said gently. "I will protect them." The attackers were skilled, but they had underestimated the humans standing quietly in the heart of the square. Aaron's eyes moved constantly, analyzing every step, every weapon, every weak point. He was not fighting out of anger. He was calculating, precise, and deliberate. Liara watched in awe as he drew his sword, the human blade glinting in the sunlight. Unlike Althoran weapons, flashy and loud, the sword was simple, elegant, and deadly. Every movement of Aaron's body was controlled and purposeful. He did not attack recklessly. He defended, guided, and turned the enemy's own energy against them. The first attacker charged at him with an energy spear. Sidestepped with human agility, the tip of his sword intercepting the strike. Sparks flew as the metal met energy, and with a swift, controlled motion, he disarmed the attacker and sent him sprawling without serious injury. Liara could hardly breathe. She had seen humans display courage before, but never like this. It was one thing to be kind, peaceful, and clever, but to act decisively in the middle of such danger, protecting the innocent with both strength and strategy. It was breathtaking. More attackers advanced, unmoved among them like water flowing through rocks, anticipating their moves and redirecting them. Guards inspired by his presence began to fight more effectively. They followed his subtle instructions, forming a line that trapped the invaders in narrow passages. Aaron's calm authority and human ingenuity turned the tide. Even as the odds seemed overwhelming, Liara felt a mixture of fear and pride. The man she had married, the one she had loved for his kindness and patience, was now revealing a side she had only glimpsed in moments of observation. This was courage tempered by wisdom, strength guided by morality, and skill controlled by intellect. The rogue faction leader, a tall alien with jagged armor and a vicious energy blade, charged toward Ewan directly. Leora's eyes widened. This was the moment she had feared. The leader's blade clashed with Aaron's sword, sparks flying with every strike. But Ewan did not hesitate, moving with precision and calm. Each parry, each step, was measured. He defended the innocent, protected the guards, and guided the attackers into positions where they could be captured without unnecessary harm. The clash was intense, but brief. With a final swift movement, Ewan disarmed the leader, sending him to the ground. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader defeated and facing the calm human in the center of the square, began to retreat. Liara ran to him, her chest heaving. You did it. You saved them all. Sheathed his sword and looked around at the city, at the citizens slowly returning to safety, and at the guards who now regarded him with newfound respect. It is not about me, he said quietly. It is about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Peace is always the goal, but courage is necessary when peace is threatened. The council arrived shortly after, assessing the aftermath. Many were in shock, not only at the audacity of the rogue faction, but at the skill and bravery of the human who had stood at the center of the chaos. Liara watched as they whispered to each other, their previous doubts about humans now replaced by cautious admiration. Later, in the quiet of their home, Liara sat beside Ewan, her mind still reeling from the day's events. You fought with such skill and calmness, she said softly. I knew humans could be brave, but this was extraordinary. Ewan smiled faintly, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. I did what had to be done. Humans are peaceful by choice, not by weakness. We watch, we plan, and when the moment comes, we act with courage, intelligence, and care. Liara rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a mix of relief and awe. The man she had married was gentle, yes, but he was also a force of nature when needed, a human who combined morality, intelligence, and courage into every action. She realized that this was the true essence of humanity, the ability to be peaceful in daily life, yet unstoppable when protecting what mattered most. The following days were filled with recovery. The city repaired the damage, citizens returned to their routines, and the council formally recognized Ewan for his actions. Not as a warrior, not as a hero seeking fame, but as a human whose courage and wisdom had saved countless lives. Liara walked with him along the city walls one evening, the twin moons rising above the towers. She squeezed his hand gently. You are more than I ever imagined. Gentle, clever, and yet unstoppable when it matters. He looked at her with his calm, steady eyes. That is what humans are, he said simply. We are peaceful, but we are not weak. We act for those we care about, for what is right, and for the future we believe in. Liara smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had married a human thinking he was only peaceful. She had come to love his kindness, patience, and intelligence. But now she understood the full truth. Beneath that peaceful exterior was a hidden strength, a courage tempered by wisdom, and a brilliance that could face any danger without hesitation. And she knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, Ewan would be ready. Not because he sought power, not because he craved victory, but because he was humana, being capable of peace, brilliance, and courage in equal measure. For the first time, Liara understood what it truly meant to be married to a human, to walk beside someone who was gentle in daily life, yet extraordinary when the world demanded it. She rested her head against his shoulder, letting the quiet of the night settle around them. The city was safe, the citizens were alive, and the man she loved had revealed a strength she would never forget. And in that moment, Liara whispered a promise to herself that she would stand by him through peace and through conflict, knowing that together they could face anything. Because the human she had married was not just peaceful, he was capable of greatness beyond imagination. The city of Althra was alive once more, but the echoes of the recent attack lingered in its streets. Repairs were underway, crystal shards replaced, energy conduits restored, and streets cleared of debris. Citizens moved with a cautious optimism, still mindful of the danger that had come so close. Yet the city had survived, and much of that survival was owed to a single human who had stood in the heart of chaos and acted with unmatched courage. Liara walked beside Yuan through the central square, where merchants were reopening their stalls and children cautiously returned to play. Even in the aftermath of battle, the beauty of Althra remained a city of shining towers and flowing light but today. It seemed even brighter, as if the people's hope had been renewed by witnessing bravery in its purest form. "You did it?" Yuan Liara said softly, glancing at him. "You saved so many lives. It's not through force alone, but through intelligence, courage, and patience." Houston shook his head gently. "It was not about me. It was about protecting the innocent, about ensuring that peace could continue. That is what humans do. We do not seek glory. We act because it is right." Liara looked at him, awe written on her face. She had loved him for his kindness, his patience, his gentle ways, but now she understood that these qualities were inseparable from the courage and brilliance he had shown. He was peaceful by choice, yes, but his strength, when required, was extraordinary. Word of his deeds spread quickly throughout the city. Citizens began leaving small tokens of gratitude, flowers, handcrafted trinkets, messages of thanks,
X-cards.
And soldiers who had once doubted the value of humans now regarded Yuan with respect, inspired by his calm decisiveness and strategic mind. Even the council, often slow to praise outsiders, held a formal assembly in his honor. The hall was crowded, filled with officials, scholars, and citizens alike. Liara stood beside Une as the council spoke. They recounted the events of the attack, describing how the rogue faction had been subdued, how citizens had been protected, and how time and again Un had guided the defenders with unmatched foresight and skill. "You have shown us," the council head said, voice resonant, "that peace is not weakness. Through intelligence, courage, and moral strength, a single human has saved an entire city. We are grateful and we honor you, Uan of Earth." The crowd erupted in applause. Liara squeezed his hand proudly, tears of admiration and relief welling in her eyes. Ian remained calm, nodding slightly, his humility as steadfast as his courage had been during the battle. After the ceremony, the city began to settle into a sense of normalcy. Yet Liara noticed subtle changes in the way people interacted with humans. No longer were they merely curious or skeptical. There was respect, and in some, a hint of awe. Humans, it seemed, could be peaceful and kind, but also capable of brilliance and courage beyond the understanding of even the most advanced alien minds. Liara and Udan spent the following days quietly walking through the city, observing the repairs and the return of daily life. Children ran past them, laughing, and merchants greeted Un with smiles and small gifts. Citizens asked questions about humans, about his ways, and he answered patiently, teaching them lessons about observation, calmness, and thinking ahead without arrogance or pride. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Althra, Liara and Yuan stood atop the tallest tower, overlooking the city. The streets below were calm, illuminated by the gentle glow of the moons. And for the first time in days, Liara felt a true sense of peace. She said softly, "Today, the city knows what I have always known. You are not only kind and gentle, you are brilliant, courageous, and wise. And yet you remain peaceful. You are extraordinary." Mun smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft moonlight. "That is what humans are. We are peaceful by choice, but we have courage when it is needed. We think, we plan, and we act to protect those we care about. That is our strength." Liara leaned against him, feeling the warmth and reassurance of his presence. She realized that this was the essence of humanity, not in conquest or violence, but in the ability to face danger with intelligence, morality, and courage. Humans could be gentle and kind, but when the moment required action, they could become an unstoppable force for good. As the days turned into weeks, life in Althora returned fully to normal. Markets thrived, children played freely, and the Council implemented small reforms inspired by Aaron's strategies during the attack. The city had survived because of human ingenuity and courage, and the aliens could no longer doubt the value of their unusual visitor. Liara reflected often on the journey they had shared. She had married a peaceful human, someone she admired for his gentleness and wisdom. But she had come to understand that Aaron's strength was inseparable from his peace. His courage, brilliance, and moral integrity were all expressions of the same essence, the human spirit. One quiet evening, Liara and Un stood on the city walls, watching the moon's rise. "Do you ever wish you had more humans like you on Althora?" she asked playfully. Un chuckled softly. "Perhaps. But then the city might not learn to value peace, observation, and patience. Sometimes one is enough to inspire many." Liara smiled, understanding the truth in his words. One human gentle, kind, observant, and brave had changed the hearts and minds of an entire city. He had reminded everyone that peace is not weakness, that intelligence can triumph over chaos, and that courage can be quiet yet unstoppable. She pressed her hand against his. "I am proud to be married to you, not just because you are kind, but because you show what it truly means to be human. You are proof that peace, intelligence, and courage can coexist and that greatness does not always roar. Sometimes it simply stands, calm, and does what is right." Yun looked at her, his calm eyes filled with warmth. "I am proud to walk beside you, Liara. Together, we face whatever comes next peacefully when we can, bravely when we must." The city below them glimmered in the soft moonlight, alive and thriving, testament to the courage of a human who had drawn his sword only when necessary. Liara knew, in her heart, that the story of Aaron's bravery would be told for generations, not as a tale of war or conquest, but as a story of intelligence, morality, and the quiet, unstoppable strength of a human being. And as she held his hand, feeling the steady beat of his calm presence, she whispered a promise to herself that she would always stand with him. In peace and in danger, in calm and in chaos, she would remain by his side. For the human she had married was not only peaceful, he was extraordinary. The moons rose high over Althora, bathing the city in silver light. The streets were quiet now, but the memory of courage, the lesson of humanity, and the enduring example of Aaron's bravery would live forever in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. And in that quiet night, Liara smiled, knowing that the peaceful human she had married had shown the universe what it truly meant to be human, to love, to protect, to think, and to act with courage when it mattered most. The story of UN was complete, yet only just beginning. For humans, she knew, were capable of greatness beyond imagination. And with him by her side, Althora, perhaps even the galaxy, would never forget the day a peaceful human drew his sword.